When my boys were younger, probably around 4 and 6, we were taking a flight from where we are from in Arizona back to Pennsylvania. My husband and I looked at each other and had this genius idea to get them tablets. Now, this was probably back in around 2015. We did not have the information and the data that we have now on what these little devices do to kids and how it impacts their behavior. We quickly learned and decided we were never taking that tablets with us on a plane again. Now, this might be you. You might just need a break. Maybe you're home with your kids all the time, or you're homeschooling, or you just don't have time to yourself, or you just want to have time to be able to cook dinner without being needed every 5 seconds. So you hand over the iPad. Then later, you feel like parenting is so hard and your kids just won't listen, or they have really challenging behaviors, big emotions, back talk that you didn't even know could exist out of a little human. What you might not realize is that little break that you're getting from handing over a device may be costing you more than you wanted to. We now have research on what screens are actually doing to the young developing brain, and it might not be something you've heard yet. And that is what this episode is going to be about. And before we get into it, I created a free resource called the Screen Time Menu. It is what it sounds like. It's a menu of things that your kid can do that's age appropriate, that does not require them being on a device. We have used this bad boy for many, many years, especially when my kids say, I'm so bored. Here you go. We have a whole list of things that you can do that don't require me, and doesn't require you being on technology. It is also one of my number one downloaded resources, which tells me that parents genuinely see the value of it and see that it helps. The link is in the show notes. Okay, now let's talk about why you need this screen time menu. I've had to convince myself that technology is not an enemy because in our house, it has felt like that. And that is why I'm so passionate about this topic and why I have helped so many parents detox their kids off of iPads, computers, video games, especially when it is majorly impacting their emotional regulation and their behaviors. Thinking that technology is the enemy isn't really helpful because then I can't connect with my kids, especially since they love it so much. Also, I want to start this out by saying it's not our fault. It just took over. And then these companies are super, super smart and want our kids to be addicted and want them to use them all the time because that means their profits go up, right? And that's not what this episode's about. This episode is really just to help you make decisions on whether or not you're going to hand over an iPhone, iPad, tablet over to your kid once you learn what it's doing to their brain. I firmly believe that when we know better, we can do better. And we're not going to do better 100% of the time because perfection does not exist. And it's really hard to avoid technology in this world. I mean, I can't even take my kids to a pediatric dentist without there being iPads laying on a countertop for them to play with. That is so hard. And that is why we have to be really choosy, especially with a kid who is very, very susceptible to screen addiction. Again, why I've had to learn about all of these things. And then I also have a kid who never touched a device until he was at least 6 years old. I lied. He touched an iPad, or no, my phone one time when I was in a special education meeting at a school that we were looking to enroll our kids in. I forgot our activity backpack. I didn't know what else to do because he would not sit still and these people were staring at me. So yes, I handed my phone over to him. I can see though from him not having access to any kind of devices and very little TV time. We turn our TV on just on the weekends for the most part. It never is on Monday through Thursday for the most part. I have seen how it has really impacted in a good way my child's development and his ability to be bored and be creative and be a good friend and his social skills and all the things, especially compared to my other two. They didn't have a ton of technology in 0 to 5, but definitely a lot more than he did. I also think it's really important to talk about because it's something you can actually take action on. Not that long ago, my son and I were shopping at a Tanger outlet. If you haven't been to one, it's an outdoor mall. We were sitting on a bench. As parents were rounding the corner, we would see strollers and toddlers holding their parents' hands. And we were kind of just chatting and people watching, to be honest. What we saw was almost every single toddler or baby was not looking around. That little human was staring at a device, an iPhone, an iPad. What that made me realize was that so many parents must not understand what it's actually doing to their brain wiring and their brain development. And this is why, again, I'm so passionate about this topic. When I do discovery calls and people come on, which you can book one by going to raisingkidswithpurpose.com/chat, I like to really understand what is going on and why they are on a call with a parent coach and trying to get some support. And I want to support you. I want to support them in the best way that I can. And a lot of times they start talking about their kids' behaviors, big emotions, a lot of talking back, disrespectful, just not listening, really struggling with sleep, struggling to eat well, routines, struggle with transitions, and major hyperactivity. My first question is always, how much technology do they have? A lot of the parents will sheepishly say, "Oh, well, I let them watch a movie here and there to get a break." Now, watching a movie on a screen that's far, we're going to talk about this, is not the problem. What happens and what contributes to a lot of these behaviors that they're describing is if they are using a handheld device, they're swiping, it's interactive, it's very active participation. Then you have the blue light and all the other things that that we'll talk about too. And it is just overstimulating the brain. So whenever that device is not in front of the child, that is why you're seeing a lot of these behaviors. Okay, let's talk about what's going on. I keep saying it impacts the brain, especially with brain development. What's actually going on? Here is where I'm going to dive a little bit into the neuroscience and hopefully bring in some stories too so that it doesn't get to a point where I want. But this is so important to understand. The brain is under construction, especially in those first 5 to 7 years of life. That is the most critical window for brain wiring. There are these things called neural pathways, and they are building language, attention, emotional regulation, the ability to make good choices, all of the things that we really want our children to have, and all the things and the skills that make our jobs as parents so much easier. And also learning how to form social connections. That is all developing in those first 5 to 7 years of life. Screens aren't just occupying kids and keeping them busy so you can get stuff done. What is happening is they are actively shaping and wiring the brain. I'm going to grab my brain here for those of you watching on YouTube. I have a model, a brain model that I love, love using. And what they're finding, key research is finding now that this is the most developed part of the brain, which is the downstairs part of the brain, the emotional part of the brain, or what is called the reptilian. And that is, it controls our ability to breathe and pump our blood and keep our heart going. It keeps us alive. And then the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, that is where all of these skills that I was just talking about that we want to develop. Well, what happens in those first 0 to 7 years of life is neural connections form to connect that, what Dr. Dan Siegel calls the downstairs brain, up to the upstairs brain. What research is now showing, what technology and screens is doing, is limiting the connections up to the frontal lobe. It is linked to reduced brain cortex thickness, and it's actually changing the brain structure that can affect cognitive development. Again, cognitive development, if you hear these words, these are the skills in the brain that we want to be developed. It is what helps your kid make good choices. It helps us make good choices. We want to have access to that prefrontal cortex in ourselves as well. Screen time in toddlers is also linked to worse inattention problems. The more screens at a preschool age, the more attention issues show up later. I have been seeing a lot of reels on Instagram, which I do find a little funny because they're telling us all about the dangers of screens and technology while they're using the platforms to teach you, and the platforms that keep you sucked in and rob you of attention and focus and all the things. But I have learned a lot from that platform. And what I've been seeing a lot is Jared Cooney. I think that's his name. I'll link to Harvey Cooney. I'll link to his information, his Instagram in the show notes. He keeps popping up in my feed and talking about how this is the first generation, the current generation of kids that has cognitively declined from the previous generation. That has never happened before that they know of. And he is contributing it a lot to technology. And this is why. So then tablet use at age 3.5 is also linked to increased anger and frustration by the time that they're 4.5. And then what happens is it just continues to be this cycle, and it keeps them trapped in those big, big emotions. Using devices to calm a dysregulated child. Sometimes we have been told, oh, we'll just hand this over to them. It's going to help calm them. It may seem like it works in the moment, but what it's doing is preventing their brain from developing their own self regulation skills, and they're becoming dependent on that device because the device essentially starts regulating for them, and then their brain never learns how to do it. Another piece of this is the small portable devices when used over a long time. It basically are being called real neurodevelopmental disruptors when it comes to sleep. There's a lot of science behind this if you want to dive a little bit more, but it really, really impacts your brain's ability to produce melatonin. And we need melatonin to be able to sleep. And then that's why a lot of parents are giving their children melatonin. And it's just another cycle. And even background TV, just having TV on, can decrease your child's language abilities. Okay, you're seeing what is happening to the brain. It's helping actively wire it, but wire the parts that we don't necessarily want to get stronger. We want the executive function skills, the skills up in the frontal lobe, to get stronger. And then over time, what happens is it creates a brain that finds reading, playing, having conversations, nature, doing things in real life. They find it really, really boring. Boring to the part, or boring to where they almost feel uncomfortable. It's like it hurts. It's not just, oh, the boredom that we experienced as kids because we did not have technology constantly stimulating our brains. It's much deeper than that. And then that's when you might see a lot of explosive tantrums when the device is taken away. There's videos of that all over the internet, and I see it in my own home. And it's not even when the device is being taken away. I notice it for a good 48 hours after. It's as if it is sending my kid's brain into hot coals. The fire's out, those coals are still really hot. So the tiniest triggers causes the explosion to happen again within about, I would say, 2 days after the screen use. And there's a caveat, there's nuance to this. If you have a child with neurodivergence and there's arguments that it can cause neurodivergence, then it can impact them even greater. I have a son, as I mentioned, who is very susceptible to screen addiction. We've done neurotransmitter testing on him. I'm almost certain that his brain has no good gate on dopamine release. It's basically as if the floodgates open and all of that dopamine comes rushing out. And it's really, really hard for him to bring it back down. And that's why he's so drawn to the technology. And that's also why it's really, really hard for him to stop using it as well. You can kind of think about it like, dopamine. There's a difference between quick dopamine and slow dopamine. The quick dopamine delivers it instantly and it's very intense. Think about it like a fireworks show. Whereas building a block tower or drawing a picture or playing an instrument, even doing more adrenaline type of activities, riding bikes, riding dirt bikes, all of that still creates dopamine, but it's a slow release dopamine. And that is what we want because that is earned through effort and imagination. When a child's brain gets used to the fireworks are constantly going, then the slower stuff is just almost intolerable. It's really, really hard. Because I was preparing this talk and I was going onto Instagram to look up a video that I wanted to mention, on my feed, a video or a carousel popped up from a mom that said, "This is what we did to reset our kids' dopamine." And it looked like her son was a teenager, early teenager. And it was really, really hard, is what she said at the very beginning, because the brain is just so used to all this dopamine release. It's a lot more than, oh, it's just making the connections in the bottom part of the brain and not to the top, but it's also impacting the neurotransmitters and the hormones that are being released. Now, you have probably seen that there are guidelines, or your pediatrician has told you that the American Pediatric Association has these guidelines on how much screen time is okay. I personally don't agree with it. Not that, it says 0 to 2 should have no screen time. Completely agree with that. But then it goes further into the age of the kid and how much time they can have every day. I think it's focusing on the wrong thing. It's focusing on time that they can be on it versus what we should be looking at is, why are they on it in the first place? It is so clear on how a kid learns to develop all of these skills is through real life interactions. If you want your child to read early, they don't need ABC Mouse or whatever the learning apps are. I mean, we have been marketed to that they do help with those things, but what they really need is to build knowledge. They need real life interactions, to hear actual language, to be spoken to. They need to be in connection. They need to experience things in real life. And something I saw once was, it's really hard for kids to enjoy nature because they watch things online and it happens so quickly. In order for those videographers to capture real life fights in the wild, it probably takes them months of sitting, waiting, and then it finally happens. Now I think they just send cameras out and they do the sitting and waiting. In real life, it is much slower. And this is why it is so important to look at the activities that your kid is doing. Now, if they need to watch a movie, or if they do really enjoy that, or you enjoy doing that as a family, or watching a TV show, talk to them about it. Bring what they're learning on the screen into real life. My son, who really, really, really likes video games, we would bring it into the real world. we would do things like he liked Zelda. So then I found this amazing chef with this cookbook that makes real life recipes for video games. And he loved cooking all the things from that game. Or he had this Zelda encyclopedia that he would read. The font was super tiny, and that boy, it was had lots of pages. I think 400 some pages in this book. He read that thing front to back, physical book in his hands. So I'm not saying, oh my gosh, you can never let your kid have technology. It is about balance, and it's about attuning to if it's impacting their development. The reason why a lot of parents hand over an iPad to a young child, a baby, a toddler, preschooler, is because that age is hard. That age, they have a lot of emotions and behaviors, and you're trying to teach them all these things, and sometimes you just need a break. The irony of this, though, is you hand it over to entertain your child so that you could have a break. Then the research shows that the regular device use in order to soothe or entertain your young kid is actually what can cause or worsen their emotional dysregulation, their attention issues or impulse control, inhibition, the lack of control in how they behave and act, the sleep problems. And then so you're handing them an iPad to get a break from the behavior. Then the behavior gets harder. Then you hand them the iPad again to have a break from their hard behavior. Then do you see what happens? I call this the crazy cycle. We just hop right on. There's so many things in parenting that we hop onto this cycle, and then we stop and think to ourselves, how do I get off? This is how we get off, is by having a balance, by having activities that they can do. I had mentioned at the beginning that we did hand my son, or I did, I handed my son a cell phone once because I didn't have anything else to entertain him with. When they were really little, I had 3 different backpacks that had all sorts of things in them: sticker pads, building toys. Sometimes they were toys that we couldn't take into certain places. Other times I had things that were quieter or louder or whatever. I think by the time that my kids started to grow out of this stage, it was just a mess in all of the backpacks. I think they started out nice and organized. All that to say, I had a plan. I had these backpacks. They were already filled. I didn't have to fill them as I was leaving the house. I would go into the closet, grab it, and take it with me most of the time. There were other things that I would do to be proactive is to strew. I would lay things all over my house, books, building blocks, any kind of quiet, open-ended kind of toy or something that my kid would play with for hours and hours. I wouldn't say, "Hey, come play with this thing." At least for my kids, when I do that, they reject it. And so instead, if they just happen to stumble upon it and see it laying there, then they engage with the toy. And it is just so much better for their brain because it is teaching their brain that they have to work hard for that dopamine. And then it helps them develop all of the other skills that we keep talking about as well. And that is why I have this screen time menu. There are all sorts of things on it. It's a whole PDF printable packet. There are pages in there where you can add your own activities based on what you have in your house. And it's great because what I've done is I have laminated it, hang it on my command center. Then my kids grab it whenever they say they're bored. Now they will go to it on their own. For about a year or two, I would have to hand it over to them whenever they would tell me there's nothing to do. Can I just please go play a video game for 20 minutes? Something else I hear parents say all the time, I have thought this as well, is that when kids are on a game with friends, or maybe their friends live in a different state, oh, well, this is the way they're connecting with each other. Well, that's really pseudo social skills. What's happening instead is that they're building a parallel dopamine hit. They're together, however, they're not truly connecting because real social skills happen in the mess of unstructured play. There's negotiation, there's boredom, there's having to figure things out, there's disagreeing with each other, agreeing with each other, laughing. They're emitting energy that they can feel, that their nervous systems are interacting with each other. And all of that goes away whenever you have a device in front of you. My son's psychologist said it is better if they're playing video games in person, Nintendo games, games where they can move their bodies and they're in person together. However, it's still not working on the socialization like we think it does. I have worked with a couple of families that used to give their kids iPads all the time because for different reasons. One was to motivate the kids and get them to do stuff. Well, if you do this thing, I'll give you iPad time. And I developed a customized, personalized plan to help that family wean her kids off of iPad time. After 12 weeks, they were no longer using it. She never didn't need to use it as a motivation anymore. What she found is that the kids started to get along so much better and would create together, build together, act and sing, and they were enjoying the slow dopamine activities with each other. So she was still able to get things done without them needing her constantly. Then another family I worked with, they were using the iPad more just to get a break because it was a lot. And the mom's nervous system was just completely depleted. Understandable, right? But what was happening was that cycle that I had talked about, how the behaviors are hard. We hand the iPad so we have some alone time. And then the behaviors get harder because of what's happening in the inside the brain and the body and the nervous system wiring because of the overstimulation. And then it just becomes this vicious cycle. I walked her through how to slowly figure out ways to get them off the screens. It was hard, and it was a process, and it's not something that just happens overnight. So if you hear this, I'm throwing the iPads away, you might want to pause on that. And if you want to work on these things with someone who has been through it and still is going through it, also someone who has been working with other families going through this as well, you can go to raisingkidswithpurpose.com/chat. And I'd love to see how my purpose parent transformation program to see if it would be a good fit. And you can get personalized, customized support and not just generic advice because that doesn't usually help anyone. Here's what I want you to sit with. If there are behaviors that are driving you crazy, or you're finding yourself grabbing the iPad, or finding yourself giving your child technology at a restaurant or when you're grocery shopping, and then later the behaviors are driving you bananas, just remember you have the opportunity to make some changes. It starts with figuring out a way to replace that time on the tablet and start small. That's it for this episode. Don't forget to grab the screen time menu in the show notes below. And if you are wondering where to get started, I'd love to chat. You can also leave a comment and subscribe and like and do all those things you're supposed to do on YouTube.